Hi, and welcome to Talking Wildfire with Michael Hill. Today I'm here with Murry Taylor, and Murry Taylor was a smoke jumper for a really long time, and something special about smoke jumping that I've seen over the years is her storytelling. One of my favorite parts of smoke jumping that I really liked was the evenings when we sat around the campfire and told stories. And today me and Murray are going to talk about stories and how they're important in life and also within the smoke jumping culture. This is Murry Taylor. Can you tell us a little about your thoughts on storytelling?
Yeah, Mike, thanks for recognizing the value of this story. We kind of hit on it a little bit before on our talk. And especially, we can talk about storytelling in a wider sense later, but especially that scene you talked about being out around the campfire at night with the bros in the wilderness. Um, to me, I think you could ask dozens of jumpers, and they would all tell you that was one of the very favorite moments of that whole experience. And the reason was, Mike, it was very primal. It was primal because that's the way we evolved as humans. We evolved as humans out in the dark, sitting around a campfire, listening to people speak about their lives and what they were involved in. I mean, humans, that was such a primal experience. And a lot of smoke jumping was a journey back to nature. There's no doubt about it. And so, sitting around the campfire, I actually had jumpers say to me at times, I always love being on a fire with you because you always told interesting stories. And of course, I really loved hearing that. Uh, and I've wondered about why some people tell stories and why some people don't. And I've come to think that, Mike, in a way, that storytelling might actually have a hereditary facet to it. Willa Cather, the great American author, I think Willa Cather was probably born in the late, 1885 or whatever. She was born out in Nebraska in a soddy. She ended up writing My Antonia and Old Pioneers, and my favorite book of hers, Death When Death Comes to the Archbishop. When she was a little girl at 8 or 9, Willa Cather would go over and sit in those sod houses in the winter around their little stoves or whatever they had, and that kid would tell stories. And all the neighbors would come and listen to her tell these fantastical stories as a child. So I actually think that it's possible that there is a hereditary part of the brain. I think maybe some storytellers, I couldn't imagine that evolution would have everybody being a storyteller because nobody would be listening, right? I mean, but I do think some talk and some listen. And I don't think it's just because people like to talk either. People will tell you that I do like to talk, and I do like to talk, but I've listened to people talk when they don't say much. They just chatter all the time. But storytellers seem to tell storytellers, I think the way a storyteller's brain works is that it's the way they perceive life from their perspective, the way they come to understand life and what happened are in these capsules of stories. You saw it in smoke jumping. You know, Chuck Shealy has a great collection in the folklore part of the University of Montana. They collected all those jump stories up there at Missoula. And now Chuck has a bunch of stories collected, and it's in the Eastern Washington University over there. So, yeah, it was a primal experience to be out there. I think in many ways the stories that we told were the archetypal type of stories told throughout, down through humanity. Um, Stories about life and death and what it means to give your all. I think really, and if I were to characterize the nature of a lot of smoke jumper stories, I would say they were not only stories that defined what it meant to be good smoke jumpers, they were stories what it meant to be a good human being. And I think we were all looking for that. And I think a lot of us found that in the camaraderie. And let's face it, there aren't a lot of experience today where men, young men, can be in a group of people that they hugely admire and have that equal admiration given back to them. The acknowledgement that, yes, I see who you are and I see how you came here and I see how you gave it your all. Um, and it's validating to, I think, something that every human being needs to know. At some point, the smoke jumper stories eventually conveyed. This is true of firefighting too. This is true of hot shots. This is true of a lot of people that have great experiences in fire, and a lot of, not just in smoke jumping, but wherever they go, wherever the most is asked of them, and they have to go digging deeper. When you have to go to that place that you don't want to go anymore, but you have to because you're there with your buddies, and you're gonna do it now because you're going to do it because you could not do it being with them. And that's when you go to that place and you dig deep and you try extra hard and you work your ass off and you find out that, in fact, what you always hope was true is, in fact, true. And that is, at times, you can be brave and you can be strong. No, I think that's something that everybody needs, not just to believe into it superficially, but to know it. Yes, I can be brave. I can be strong. And I think you can go forward in the world with a lot, knowing that.
That's those are some really good thoughts about it all, Murray. I think something that you and I have talked about also is how to differentiate between good stories and other stories. Let's talk about that for a minute. What's your thoughts on that?
You know, Mike, I had a great talk with Rod Dow recently, and I've been thinking to myself, I must have had some kind of really good judgment when I was young about people. I don't know what it was. I've been thinking, because the people I chose to like as friends when I was young turned out to be really great dads, great husbands, great citizens. And I thought, I wonder what it was. I mean, I had a lot of luck there picking some really good people. And Mike, I think I figured it out. I've come to understand, I mentioned this to Rod, and he went right into it. I think what it was when I was young, the people that I picked to be around and like, there was no disingenuousness about them. There was no artificiality about those people. They were genuine. And Rod goes, they were genuine. And I said, that's how I see it now. There was no pretense. Because you can spot pretense right away. And I think it automatically makes a person suspicious and on edge that this is pretense. But the jumpers, many of them didn't give a damn whether you liked them or not. That's just who they were. And when you had that, you didn't have to approve of everything they did. But I'll tell you what, you did approve of the most part of their main character, and you knew you could trust it. So I think that's kind of what. And so I think I tended to listen to their stories. And of course, being in smoke jumping, like I said before, it not only defined what it meant to be a good smoke jumper, but it meant to be a good human being too. The classic smoke jumper story that I know of is where, this is an example. In '98, when I was jumping out of Winthrop up there as a booster from Alaska, We jumped a fire up in the Colville on the Sullivan Lake District, and it was about probably 10 acres when we jumped it. By the time we had 4 loads on it, it was close to 20. We had 2 loads out of Winthrop and a load out of Redmond and a load out of Reading. And so we split up, and we were already going up the left flank and the right flank, and it was in some old fuel that had been partly logged. It was heavy fuels dam, and it was on a south slope. It was kind of tough, and so we just got lined out and started digging line, and this is the quintessential smoke jumper story, I think. And it got to be midnight and 1 o'clock, and the question was like, we may be just pissing in the wind here. Maybe we should go get some sleep and get up in the morning and be fresh and go after this. And when we always had that talk, we almost damn near always said no. Let's go for it tonight. And so we did, and we agreed on that, and we rounded that curve. I'd say, we finally came together about 3-4 o'clock in the morning, up at the top. You know how it is. The wind goes down, the humidity comes up, the temperature drops. You have a chance to go across the head. You eat a tremendous amount of smoke, and you feel like shit for sure and beat up. But then here they come, and you can hear their saws. And I used to scout ahead a lot and talk to guys about what our possibilities were. And then when they come together, you've seen it. They raise their saws. They do the high five. I mean, it's this, And that moment, we had the line. We scattered back down the line to hold the line. And then, Mike, we went down to a little flat, and we sat there as the sunrise out of the east, up over Idaho. And we had little fires, coffee fires. And in that moment, I said to myself, this is where I need to be. This is where I belong. These are the people I need to be with. And in that moment, I think every jumper has had that. And they know, yeah, this was right. This is where I needed to come. And I think that's the quintessential jumper story. We wrapped that fire up and caught it. And I think that's the one that defined the spirit that then was so hugely embedded. It was success. It was success. And I talked to Rod the other day, like Rod Dow. It was amazing some of the fires I jumped, and some that you jumped, they were scary as hell. I jumped a fire one time in the Salmon River Brace toward sunset, and you looked down and the light was on the water, and it was up on a high hillside, and the winds were squirrely, and you thought, man, I wish I was in Baja on a surfboard or somewhere other than here. But there you were in that airplane, and you knew you were going to jump. You knew, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this because George Steele's going to do it. Jeff Bass is going to do it. I'm going with these guys. They're my buddies. And, Mike, I think that taking it to the edge and believing it like that empowered so many people and transformed them into the understanding of who they were, that I just filled out 30 donation cards, thank you cards, for the NSA, for these old bros. Some of them rookied in 57. These guys go way back. Some rookied in Missoula in 60. So a couple guys rookied in McCall in 57. They're sending in $400, $500. One guy sent in $1,000. That experience, they jumped for 1-2 seasons. That experience was so important to them that 70 years later, they still want to be part of this. And they still came to Missoula. They still came to Missoula. There were 600 of us there. And we didn't have anything to share except the fact that we were smoke jumpers, and we knew what that meant. And so I feel blessed that I was part of it. Yeah, that's the story about, that's what stories can do. Willa Cather, as a little girl, was telling stories. Who knows where that came from? I think there might have been a part of her brain that was like genetic memory. We know animals have it. Maybe she was just a natural storyteller. And then John Steinbeck, I'm a huge fan of John Steinbeck. In fact, I'm going to the Steinbeck Center this weekend down in Salinas for the third time. Um, Steinbeck, from the time he was 20, wanted to write, wanted to write, wanted to write. And when he finally wrote, what did he do? He wrote stories, stories, stories about the people there in Monterey and Cannery Row. And so, I guess eventually that's the reason that I wrote the books. I had so many stories in my head when I moved out here and didn't have any electricity and stuff and started reading all the time. And I was driving down the road, I thought, I know a lot of interesting characters. Don Bell, Eric the Black. I know all these guys, and there's really interesting stories. And then finally in the summer of 91, I decided you can't put this off anymore. You got to try. And that was the beginning when I started taking the notes. And actually, Jumping Fire has been a hugely successful book of mine. And it has the stories in it. Not just of jumpers. It has those stories of the air tanker guys that we talked about. The story of 05 Charlie. And Hawkins and Powers and those fellas. So I don't know. You mentioned at one time you asked me about how I thought stories had changed. And I think you have to be careful about what stories you allow yourself to believe. I think they may not feel, but one of the ways that you can check them, if I hear a story about how great a certain politician was and what he did and this and that, like a lot of what's going on right now, and I also have read books about how we went to war in Iraq. I read The Rhythm of Leaves, a whole study of that. I followed that whole thing. If you read 3 books about that, then you kind of, when you listen to some of the media and their coverage of it, you know that they're not telling the whole truth. And the sad part about news now, news has become a product. And people warp stories nowadays to fit what their audience wants to hear. And so these audience give these people a little adrenaline bump, but in fact continue to mislead them about the facts. And if that happens too much, you can have 2 different types of stories, and then you can have a division between the red and the blue and the right and the left. And that's a luxury that I don't think we used to afford that when times were harder. It's something that people afford during a time when you can believe this or believe that or whatever. It doesn't matter one way or another in easy times. But because back in the day, in hard times, people tended to listen closely because it was important to adhere to the truth. But as time passed, the other generations, it's so interesting to me. Mike and I, you and I, Mike, we're part of the Can Do operation, right? It was Can Do. And boy, I thought that was healthy and wise for sure. And then the Can Do attitude was questioned after South Canyon. I saw the speeches at Park City up there in Utah, how some managers were crying on the microphone about how the families had suffered and how we maybe should question the can-do attitude, and we did. And the whole situation in the fire world switched to maybe we should not do this, maybe we should not do that. And so I think that affected the whole fire world in a negative way. I don't believe that it's actually saved lives. I think this backing off and slacking off and letting these fires get big has resulted in more people dying in the long run. And you can argue whatever you want about whether it's better to put fires out small or to let them go big or whatever, but I think that's an unmistakable mistake that we've made. And I don't I don't hear a lot of fire kids now. We were stoked up. We were having fun. Christ, when I jumped 60 years ago, we didn't even keep track of our time. We were having so much time. We had enough money, and that was it. We were going to Mexico in the winter or wherever. But the young kids now seem to want more. The job doesn't pay enough. They're not that quite happy. There's a bit of a crybaby aspect in it now. And I think that maybe came from the question about, for the longest time, Forest Service people have complained to me that they wanted to hike up the hill at night and go to that, but the Forest Service here on the Klamath stopped people hiking at night. It was too dangerous to hike at night. And I think when you take away the chance of those kids to do that extra thing to prove they're extra tough, I think you rob them of what makes the heart and soul of firefighting and life itself, really.
Murray, I have a question for you. I know that you're a master storyteller, and can you tell us a little bit about the elements of a good story? For people that would like to be a storyteller, what can you share? What's the elements that makes a good story?
Well, of course, in fiction, there's the old saying about in fiction, only trouble is interesting. And then this is different in the oral tradition. But just briefly in fiction, what you constantly have is this pattern. You introduce a character and you do some things to endear the reader to this character so that they identify with this person is having, and this person has a problem. They're confronted with this real difficult situation. And so the reader identifies, wow, how is this person going to do it? How are they going to get through this? This is the ultimate story, the struggle. And so then you have them react and adjust to them, make their best bid at, and then they do a little bit of good, and then there's a setback again. Now they're set back again. And then they continue to go ahead and put the best foot forward, and they gain a little more traction. Then they're set back again. And then they try again, and they try to pull it together, and they are set back again in a way that seems like they can never come out of this now. They are screwed no matter how hard they tried. But then somehow you have the crisis and resolution at the end. It's what they call there's a turn of an unexpected turn at the end. There's something that happens that you bring back from the whole story. It's a reversal of expectation, and your hero triumphs. And then there's the story, and that's what we've learned. That's not always true. Some are tragedies, and they don't. They don't triumph. But mostly that's the pattern of the narrative story that you write. The oral story, gosh, I don't know. The ones we told around campfires were often just funny. They were funny, and bear stories. So I don't know. Yeah, I do believe that stories were the adhesive that provided the glue that helped us. It helped jumpers define who we were, and I here's an example of a good smoke jumper story. I think, and I don't know what year it was. It was when I was first in Alaska from 73 to 78. We were down, we jumped a fire by, this is a quick story about, I'll give you an example of what I think a good smoke jumper story is. We jumped a fire down by Lake Iliamna, and I jumped twice at Lake Iliamna. Man, oh man, that place is unbelievable. There were parts of Alaska that were flat and boring and ridiculous, and you saw some of that. But there were parts of Alaska that were stunningly beautiful, and Lake Iliamna was one of them down there south of Lake Clark and the park and Katmai and all that. Anyway, we demobed into the lodge there at Lake Iliamna, And we were waiting for an airplane to come and pick us up. And the owner of the lodge said, "Hey, you guys take my van and go down there to the river, the Nehalem River, I think it was. Go down there and look at the salmon coming in that river." He said, "You got to see that." So we went down there, Mike. It was a couple, 3 miles down to this dump right into Lake Iliamna. My God, we walked down there from the end of the road, and Mike, there was a coil of black, 20 feet in diameter, solid fish, just side by side, coming up one side of the bank. It just, the bros saw it and just went completely nuts. They started cutting willow spears and throwing rocks and trying to spear them, and they were just raising hell trying to catch them. And two guys had a fishing license, Rob Collins and Scott Bates. Anyway, they were trying everything they could to get the fish, and I just decided to walk up the river a ways. So I walked up the river a ways, and I see this guy up there about 100 yards. He's catching one right after another. And he said, "Hey, you want a fish?" I said, "Oh, sure." So he gave me a fish about, I don't know, 30 inches long, a big, beautiful salmon. So I took it back down, and the bros were all after the fish over there, throwing rocks and everything. They had a burlap bag, and I put the fish in the bag. And so then I decided I'm just going to go up on the hill and sit up on the hill and watch this whole scene. I don't need to get into the fishing. So I went up there and sat in the grass and watched the bros down by the river there. And here came this airplane around the side. It was a yellow Super Cub with floats on it. Went around the point and went out of sight. And so I was up there watching everything, and pretty soon this guy comes walking up through the grass. I jump up and say, "Oh, man, you're just in time. The fish are really here. You're going to have a great time." And he got here just in time. He pulls open his coat, and yeah, he's got a huge badge. He's from the Alaska Fish and Wildlife. Uh-oh. So he walks on down there, and I watch him go down there. He catches them red-handed, see. And they claim that, well, they weren't really trying to catch them. They didn't have any fish. So he went and looked in the bag, and there was the salmon that I put in there. And they didn't know about that. So he writes up John Wallach, he writes him up, and he writes up Jim Veach, because they had the poles at the time that belonged to Collins and to Bates. So he writes them up and tells the rest of them, "Shame on you, you don't have license." And Collins and Bates did have fishing license. So anyway, then we go back to Fairbanks, and a couple weeks later, it's close to the end of the season, John Wallach comes into my room in the barrack and goes, "Look, I've written this letter. I want you to read it." The guys brought me stuff to read because they thought I write pretty well. And I want you to read this. "I got to leave Fairbanks. I can't stand it anymore. I'm not going to see that magistrate. I got to go see Francie. I can't stand it anymore. I'm quitting and going down to Wisconsin." I said, "You can't do that. You have to go to the magistrate and see the magistrate." "No, I'm leaving. Look at this letter." I looked at it. Okay, the letter said, "My name is John Wallach. I don't know what happened to me down there at Iliamna. I think I must have gone crazy. I saw those fish. I must have gone crazy. I'm usually not like that. I'm a good man. I have a house down in Hope, and I build a cabin. I have a wife and 2 kids, and I parachute into fires to save the animals, and I don't know what came over me then. I just lost it and tried to get those fish. And but I got to go to Wisconsin now." He sends this letter. So I said I wouldn't do that if I was you, but he left anyway, and he sent the letter in. So then about a week later, Veach goes in, Jim Veach, to see the same guy, magistrate. So while Veach is standing there, the magistrate pulls his letter out and said, "So, is this a fact? You have a house down in Hope and 2 kids and a wife, and you like to parachute into fires, Veach will look at the guy while he goes, yeah, I do." So and you parachute into fires and do this, and the Veach goes, yeah, that's right. So Veach went along with the whole thing, although he was reading Wallach's letter. The magistrate let Veach off on the strength of Wallach's letter. He let Jim Veach go on the strength of Wallach's letter, and somehow must have lost the paperwork because Wallach never heard from him either.
Wow.
So that's kind of one of my favorite jump stories.
Oh, it's good, Murray. I think I just thought of something. What do you think your life would have been like if you never were a smoke jumper? If you didn't get that experience, how would your life have turned out different, do you think?
I actually think, had I not heard about smoke jumping and seen them, and immediately just I saw them parachute up over the Sierras. I put this in Jumping Fire too. And when I saw that Doug up there in that clear blue high Sierra sky and those parachutes coming out, I said, man, going to fires is fun, but that has to be the best way of all. And not everybody would have thought that, and from then on, I wanted to be one. And 2 years later, I was accepted in Reading. But to answer your question, I think I would have eventually gone to the mountains. I had, as a little kid on a farm out in the west side of San Joaquin Valley, west of Fresno, I used to stand as a kid and stare at the mountains. And when my family camped in there, I counted the days until we would go home. And then on one trip, when I was only like 10 or 12, we passed a little cabin that had a Jeep. It was just starting to rain, a Jeep parked in front, and some smoke coming out of the. And I thought, that lucky guy, look at him, he lives up here. And then it occurred to me, you could live up here too. And from then on, I knew I was going to live in the mountains. And so I think I would have had a job in the mountains. I would have been a forester. I may have been an FMO on some district. But, and I'd have been pretty happy, but never as happy or completely fulfilled as I was becoming a jumper. I think I'd have left the valley. I wasn't cut out to be a farmer, which my dad was. But, yeah, I don't know what it was. I think some people look at fire and smoke and automatically want to run the other way. But I think jumpers see fire and smoke and think, oh, that could be interesting. I'm heading over there. I mean, I think we were my dad saw a video one time and said, you guys were a different breed. I didn't believe it then, but I've come to kind of believe it now that there are a type, Mike, that are attracted to that see that, and right away, that's something that they want. And I've never met a jumper that said, geez, I'm sorry I was ever a smoke jumper. Not one. Yeah, not one. When Elmer, I forget his name, he was a conscientious jumper up in NCSB. He told a great story one time in that video. When that plane crashed up there and killed those guys dropping cargo, he was on another fire there close by, and they knew they had to hike over there, and he told them, this is going to be ugly, these people are going to be dead, and if you don't want to come over there, you don't have to. He was with 3 rookies. He said every one of them came over there. And so I think that's, like I said before, I think smoke jumping helped us all find a bigger part of ourselves. And I've said this before too. It was a transforming and empowering experience, and I think wildfire in general can be that.
Murray, do you think that's the key that pulls together the smoke jumper experience for people? Like you said earlier, when people, especially when they jump for a year or two in their life and they look back on it, they it tends to be something that really stands out, and it's a big moment for them. Do you think that's the glue that binds us together? Those
I
shared
do.
experiences? Yeah.
Yeah, I really do. I mean, I gave a speech down there at that. I gave a 5-minute speech down there at Reading. I think it was in the 2010 reunion, uh, and got a standing ovation for like 2 minutes. And what I mentioned, Mike, was I think the moment that made the difference for us, most of us, when we were in the door and the spotter looked up and said, okay, there's 200 and 300 yards of drift. It's mostly down low. Watch that snag patch. Do not get downwind and watch the rocks. And they're in the jump spot. There's probably rocks below the brush there. And whatever you do, don't get downwind of that fire and don't blow over the ridge. Do you have any questions? And the jumper would shake his head, and the only question he had in his mind was, how in the hell did I ever end up in a situation like this? But like I mentioned in the speech, when the slap came and the guy went out the door, there was a moment there that I think was transforming. There was a moment there that measured that I was gonna step across the threshold and take a chance at something bigger and something better than staying on board the airplane. And in that moment, I think it was an exercise in faith, in the pilots, in the spotter, in the training, and ultimately in the fact that you had the guts to do it. And when we did that over and over, we became convinced we did have the guts to do it. And I think that was the hugely that was the glue that pulled us all together for all these years.
Yeah.
Well, why we travel hundreds and thousands of miles to attend reunions? We want to be together, and feel that power. It's unmistakably. It was in Missoula this year for sure.
I would have to agree with you too, Murray. I think it's that idea of being in the door and having a gnarly jump ahead, and you're with your comrades, and you're gonna do it because they're gonna do it, and you jump out and you make you figure it out. You do it together. I'm really glad through these videos that we've done that I've had the chance to meet you and Rod and get to see some of the experience that your community, Alaska especially, has. It's been really incredible to see and be a part of, and I've really appreciated it in this journey. Thanks, Murray.
Well, Mike, I certainly appreciate your recognition of the value of that, not only of smoke jumping, but the way you've gone around the fire community. And, it's so important. I tell people that write books, don't worry if your books sell right away. The important thing is it's documented, and your videos will remain as part of the documentation. 200 years from now, a kid can pull this up and look at it and get something out of it. That'll happen. That's how the faith I have in this story of people needing what we had and what we experienced is not going away. So good for you too, Mike.
Thanks, Murray. I much appreciate it. And again, thanks for being part of the project. You really kind of added to the video library and the journey and everything. And
Yeah,
thanks,
okay.
Murray.
Well, send me a link and I'll put it on Facebook and get it out so people can see it.
Sounds good. We're doing this for all of you. If you like what we're doing, please give us a thumbs up, hit the subscribe button, and leave a comment below. See you next time.